Hello, and welcome to the National Association of Development Organizations 2020 Annual Training Conference. I'm Kevin Bird, NADO President and Executive Director of the New River Valley Regional Commission in Radford, Virginia. I'm so happy you could join us this week for the virtual conference. Of course, I wish I could be speaking to you from a hotel ballroom in Cleveland this week, because honestly, Cleveland rocks. But as you know, 2020 has different plans in store for all of us. I remember when I started in this position about 11 years ago, I poured all over the plans in the office and those in the bookcase behind me. And many of them are labeled Vision 2020 or something catchy like that. It was projecting economic trends and regional projects a decade or so in the future. And I can tell you, not a single one of those plans mentioned a pandemic in 2020. It has been absolutely wild since March. I truly hope that each of you are doing well, both physically and mentally during the pandemic, because it has certainly been a trying time. So whether you're watching from your office or in your living room or perhaps your backyard, we're grateful you're taking the time to be a part of this week's training conference, especially when time is stretched so thin these days. Although we can't see each other in person, know that there are nearly 300 of your colleagues on the line today listening in as a part of this event. During these challenging times for all of us, take comfort and find strength knowing you're not alone in your regional development and recovery efforts. Remember, your peers in the NADO family are there also on the front lines every day across the country. You'll get to hear from many of them throughout the conference. With input from our members, we have planned an exciting mix of plenaries, breakout sessions, and block party group conversations. Though we've gone virtual, we've developed an agenda, like all of our conferences, that offers both practical and cutting-edge ideas to enhance how you serve your regions. Before we get into our opening panel, I have a few opening remarks I'd like to share. There's a few housekeeping items of information for you. NADO staff will share the link to the user guide for GoToWebinar in the questions box. Although webinars and web meetings are not new events for many of us, each of the software platforms are a little different. If you're not familiar with the audio or video controls, please click on that link to find more information. You can also ask for technical help with the virtual event or ask questions about speaker presentations using the questions box. You'll have the opportunity to type information about your experiences in several sessions as well. NADO is a provider with the American Planning Association's AICP Certification Maintenance Program. Sessions that should meet the AICP certification maintenance requirements are noted in the full conference schedule. You can visit planning.org/CM to learn more about how to get approval for your attendance at these sessions. Also, please note that we're recording all sessions, so you won't have to make that tough choice of which breakout session to attend during the conference. And I know that also helps with the AICP certification maintenance as well. Next slide. So on behalf of NADO, I'd like to offer a big thank you to our sponsors for the conference, whose generous support is definitely appreciated. Three Rivers Planning and Development District is sponsoring the session OMB's revisions to 2 CFR 200, what's changed and what you need to know about it. And VC3 is sponsoring cybersecurity and the changing workplace environment. So thanks again to our sponsors for their support. Next slide. Fall is always award season here at NADO. Each year, NADO recognizes its member organizations that demonstrate valuable and effective approaches to regional economic and community development. The Alice Ann Walbrook Impact Awards, formerly known as the Innovation Awards, have recognized over 2,000 NADO member projects since 1986, and their creative efforts in advancing regional economic development and improved quality of life. In 2020, NADO is pleased to recognize 79 projects from 48 NADO member organizations spanning 19 states. These projects truly show the best that regional development organizations have to offer and are a real testament to the value they add to their regions. NADO has created an online interactive story map, which features the stories behind every single one of the award-winning projects, as well as the recipients of NADO's Excellence in Regional Transportation Awards. So head on over to nado.org/awards to view the map and take a closer look during your downtime. I can attest it's a great way to bring new ideas to your region. Also, if you don't want to miss out on the Impact Awards Showcase session that highlights 5 of these projects during the lunchtime plenary session tomorrow. Next slide. We also just announced the winners of NADO's annual photo contest. This year, nearly 120 images were submitted from members across the country that demonstrated what makes their regions great places to live, work, and play. Images were judged in 5 categories, and a People's Choice Award, a People's Choice winner, was also chosen online by the public through their Facebook page, where over 500 votes were cast. You can visit NADO.org to learn more about the winning images, and many of them are also featured in the conference program. Next slide. Now I'll take a few minutes to share a little about NADO and the NADO Research Foundation's first ever strategic plan, which was approved by the NADO Board of Directors in mid-2019. Over the past year, we've accomplished many of the goals laid out in the plan, and we're forever grateful to the membership for their support of the plan and the work that NADO and the Research Foundation staff is currently undertaking. NADO's board worked with Future IQ to lead us through an intensive planning process, which commenced in 2018. In addition to closely working with the board, Future IQ engaged the membership and staff throughout the process. Some of you may recall when Future IQ joined us during the ATC in Charlotte in 2018 to talk about the plan and discuss the impact of global changes on rural regional development in the United States. The plan has 6 guiding pillars: build institutional change, create new partnerships, promote organizational and staff capacity, broaden advocacy and networking, expand organizational resources, and strengthen the NADO membership base. Next slide. The board and staff have worked hard over the past 13 months or so to implement the plan, and as a result, much has been accomplished. In fact, I don't have enough time right now to share all the important work that's been done, but I did want to take a couple minutes to highlight some of the significant achievements since earlier in the year. First, with the help of a DC policy group, our legislative staff successfully advocated for the passing of the Reinvigorating Lending for the Future, RLF Act of 2020. A major piece of the act concerns defederalization of EDA revolving loan fund monies. Even though everyone's on mute, I can clearly hear the roar of applause for this one. This is a significant accomplishment. The legislative team also partnered with other national groups to successfully assure $1.5 billion for EDA in the CARES Act. Again, another roar of applause for this accomplishment. The Research Foundation has secured over $1.1 million in new grants for several multi-year programs and developed new partnerships with national organizations engaged in work of relevance to the membership. Staff continue to research and share examples of innovative approaches to economic development by the membership through a series of CEDS in action and rural ITS case studies. Over 50 NADO members were recognized for their important contributions to their regions this year with NADO's 3 award programs. And the organization was able to smoothly transition all operations to remote status at the onset of the pandemic, including using new platforms for virtual training like today, the events, and NADO's governance meetings. So this is a short list that's all been accomplished on the strategic plan. I encourage you to take a look at the full plan on NADO's website. I also encourage all the NADO executive directors to attend the NADO annual business meeting on October 27th for more complete report on the strategic plan. Next slide. And finally, I want to share some of the objectives for the coming year as outlined in the plan. We'll continue to identify and share emerging trends, including innovative practices. We'll work to expand our network of partnerships at the national level. Our fundraising efforts will continue as we look to new sources that allow us to grow and expand the menu of programs we can offer our members. We'll continue to stay on top of the most current policy trends and make sure our advocacy agenda is in alignment with them. And we'll continue to develop ways to strengthen our membership base. Again, I encourage you to look at the full plan on NADO's website, nado.org. And with that, I'd like to transition our opening plenary conversation, Rising to the Challenge, RDO Pandemic Response and Recovery. Every single one of you on the call today knows how much the pandemic has pushed our organizations to the limit in terms of capacity, staffing, resources, and public engagement. and you all have risen to the challenge. From coast to coast, RDOs have been there as key players supporting economic recovery during the COVID-19 pandemic. By getting PPE into the hands of those who need it most, assisting businesses with access to resources and information, dispersing funding through grants and loans, coordinating region-wide recovery initiatives, and so much more, RDOs are meeting the needs of their communities, and you're making a real difference. Up on the screen, you just see a handful of NADO member organizations in action over the past few months, providing a wide variety of services to the regions and fostering new partnerships along the way. For our opening plenary, we'll be having a roundtable discussion with a few NADO members who will share how they've marshaled the resources of their organizations to respond to the pandemic. You'll hear about the initial response efforts, what is currently underway, and long-term plans for recovery. Next slide. And so I'd like to invite our panelists to turn on their cameras as I introduce them. I'm happy to be joined today by Brett Doney. He's President and CEO of the Great Falls Development Authority in Great Falls, Montana. I'm also joined by Chris McKinney, Executive Director of the Santee Lynch's Regional Council of Governments in Sumter, South Carolina, as well as Colleen Padilla, Executive Director, Southern Oregon Regional Economic Development Incorporated in Medford, Oregon. Each of our panelists will share with us for around 7 or 8 minutes, and then we'll have a conversation with each other and all of you, including through an interactive poll to get your live input. So with that, let me turn it over to Chris to talk about how his organization has responded. Chris?
Good afternoon. First, I want to thank Kevin, NADO President, Joe McKinney, the Executive Director, for this opportunity to make this presentation. I pray everyone out there, your families and your staff are safe and continue to stay safe. So our input to our region was providing protective personal equipment, PPE, to our region. So how did we get started? We got caught flat-footed. We did not anticipate what was going on. We had no idea our state was going to get shut down. So we were not proactive in this regard. We were being reactive. We went from about working in the office to full telework in about 2 weeks. And then once we were on full telework, we were looking at how do we come back into the office. We wanted to make sure that our finance admin staff, who was still working a couple of days a week, that they could stay safe. And then what we could do to make sure when everybody else came back to work, what we could do to be safe, because our staff is our #1 resource. So we started trying to figure out how do we get PPE. And like all of you, we saw that the prices were crazy high. At one time we paid $120 for 128 ounces of hand sanitizer. It was ridiculous. On top of that, the backlog was anywhere from 3 to 4 months to get stuff in. So we had to figure out a better way so we could try to take care of our staff. Again, we were focused internal. So that drove our response, lack of supply and price. And so one of my executive leadership team members came from the private sector, and he was steeped in supply chain logistics. So we talked to my leadership team about trying to get this off the ground, and he had some contacts, and then we were off to the races running. He identified a supplier, we negotiated, and we got supplies coming in. Took care of my staff. We have a statewide association of 10 COGs. We're one of those 10. And in my conversation in the weekly telephone calls, I heard that they had similar problems where they didn't have access to PPE, and we all had workforce centers. They were worried about how they could reopen their workforce centers safely when the time came. So I took it back to my staff and I said, hey, can we extend this out beyond ourselves? My staff talked about it, kicked it around, came up with a great plan, and then they implemented it. So we kicked it out to the other COGs, and the response was overwhelming. Example, the first order was 143,000 plus masks, 15 touchless thermometers, 21 cases of sanitizing wipes, and 100 face shields, totaling about $97,000 was the initial response. So we continued to supply our brothers and sisters across the state. Then the state started to be open, and everybody wanted to comply with the CDC guidelines. And so then we started to hear trickles from our economic developers and our chambers of commerce that, hey, a lot of businesses don't have access to supplies. And so then I took it back to my leadership team and said, hey, can we broaden the tent a little bit and help out our local businesses? Because, you know, we can help them reboot. It helps our region, it helps everybody. So the team that kicked it around, came up with a plan, they had to execute. Now, mind you, we've never done anything like this before. So we learn as we go, stumbling, falling, and getting back up and keeping on going. So once we put it out on the street, we had people up to 2 hours away coming into us asking for supplies because it was just that bad around our state as well as around the country. Up to 2 hours away, people were contacting us to come and get supplies. And so to date, we've had about $265,500 in sales and PPE, and we served about 53 statewide entities, 25 government and nonprofit agencies, as well as 28 businesses. Keep in mind, our intent was never to make money. This was about providing access because access was restricted and people were gouging people for prices. So the total profit we took in was $25,000. Because again, we were not trying to make money. This was about giving people access and businesses the ability to reopen safely so we could try to start our recovery process. So what are we currently doing? We recently have halted PPE sales because it just got a little bit too high. In the retail sector, their staff salaries and benefits are not the same as what we pay our staff. And so it wasn't feasible. So we kept tabs each month measuring, is it feasible, is it not feasible? And then we came to a point where we had to stop it, but we still have the connective tissue to kick it back up if we need to with some adjustments in the pricing. But one thing that spun off of this, having access to PPE, we got a chance to come alongside our schools. We did a project called the Mask for Class Challenge, and it was all about PPE supplies for our schools because August, September, schools trying to figure out how to be reopened. Is it going to be virtual? Is it going to be in person? And we wanted our schools to know that they are a critical part of our community, A, just because they exist, but B, they are a part of economic development. So my staff, again, they put their heads together, came up with this idea. Basically, for one picture posted to social media, we provided 10 free masks, up to 4,000 masks, and we also gave them 1,000 face shields. Again, this started with us being internally focused. How can we reopen safely? And it ballooned out to help take care of our region. Long story short, so what was our why? We were looking for good PR for our agency, first and foremost. As you all know, there's a balance between being behind the scenes and being out front. We saw this was a good way to kind of get out front. We wanted to show our educators that we cared about them and we wanted them to be safe. And we wanted them to know that they are critical to us. And so we kicked that off. And we ended up donating about 13,350 masks to our 6 school districts, 4,000 face shields. And on top of that, the distributor that we've been working with donated half of the masks. He heard what we were doing. He's like, that was a great idea. He wanted to support the schools. And we got a chance to expand our reach just a little bit further. The response was phenomenal. If you could have saw the pictures, the people didn't just post pictures, the comments to support the teachers were phenomenal. It was encouraging. And as you all know, sometimes our educators in the public school system, they don't always get phenomenal support. And this time I think they did. And then for us on the backside for social media presence, it went through the roof. We had one post that garnered about a reach of 7,157, one post. Most times we get about maybe 70 reaches, not 7,000 reaches. So for a regional council of government, or RDO, that was great. And the total reach for the month was about 27,000. And all this was possible because my staff found a way to make the best out of a very bad situation. So what are we going to do moving forward? We're just going to lean forward. We're going to keep our ear to the ground, eyes open, because our mantra around here is when you add value, you become invaluable. And again, we never thought doing PPE for ourselves would evolve into doing this for our region. So we just have our eyes open and we will get in there and help solve a problem if we see an opportunity.
Great, thank you, Chris. And I love that mantra. That's really good. When you add value, you become invaluable. Fantastic, good work. So Brett, I believe you're next on our list.
Sure. Good morning, Kevin. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you to everyone out there for what you're doing. It's been a long 6 or 7 months. I used to describe it as we're running an ultra marathon. Now I tell my team, well, we've done the Appalachian Trail, but buckle up because we're going to have to lap it down to Georgia and maybe head back up to Maine and back to Georgia one more time. So our initial response was all about business retention. Our team, luckily our organization was financially strong and our team had long had flex time and had most of the team members had mobile equipment. So we were able to turn our entire team into business retention specialists overnight. We connected with over 900 businesses in our region to reach out, see how they were doing, encourage them to hang in there. And then we took the results of those calls and started to produce content that we thought would add value and help businesses of all different sizes cope with the unusual situation. We put together a crisis toolkit. Then we went into a hibernation toolkit. And as we began to reopen, we put out a reopening toolkit. And we introduced these. They were short documents, but also we held webinars and digital gatherings. We've continued to focus on that business retention aspect. We're using the mantra survive and thrive, and we've expanded the types of trainings that we offer and expanded our business advising team. This pandemic has affected certain industry sectors in different ways, certainly tourism and retail. The closure of the Canadian border has a big impact on retail in Montana. But every single business we found has been impacted. It could be supply chains, it could be workforce challenges. So we just continue to offer content that we think would help our businesses to survive, and some of them to take advantage of the situation to grow their markets. Two areas that we've focused in on. One is growing market. How do you replace the market that may not be there right now? So we've put together some courses or taken existing courses to help people develop quick revenue generating websites. We put together a website boot camp. We're offering some courses and brought in some consultants to help with how do you take a small business that might be fairly isolated rurally to begin with, and you know how thin profit margins are. So if someone is able to bring back 3/4 of their market, that might not be enough for the business to survive. So we're just trying to look at different ways to help companies get going. We've also had tremendous entrepreneurial success. You know, economic upheaval is a wonderful time to start a business, particularly if you've been let go and you've really got nothing to lose. So we've had new business starts, and we've had real estate projects that have decided to move forward. So with projects now, we've got two different types. There ones, we call it cocooning, that if they can't move forward right now, let's wrap a protective cocoon around them so that when they're ready to move forward, we can take it off the shelf and we don't lose that project. But other projects can move forward. So we've been trying to help new business starts, business expansions, and real estate projects get off the ground. We'll continue as we go forward to use all of the tools in our toolbox. We're also a CDFI. We do a lot of financing. So our immediate response was to offer deferments on principal payments and really work with every borrower to see that they had what they needed to get through this. Of course, we wanted to save the business, but we also wanted to save our revolving loan funds from losses. And we've been one of the lucky recipients of additional money from EDA and the CDFI fund. So we do have additional loan capital that now we're able to put into new projects. We did a number of emergency loans right off the bat, trained a couple of our business development team members to be triage loan officers to bring things in. And we made a number of very small immediate loans until the SBA programs and then the CARES Act money started to flow into businesses. Really appreciate the flexibility that EDA gave us to meet the needs of our borrowers and waived some of the requirements on that. Going forward, we're continuing to strengthen our organization, even though we were mobile to begin with, getting better at digital dialogues like this and really looking at how do we keep our team being productive and keep adding value over the next, we're planning on another 18 months of this. And if it ends up being just a few months, so much the better, but we're really looking at long term. We have to raise money from the community each year. So there's that investment challenge on top of everything else. One of the other things that we're getting into is, organizations, when they're hit by a crisis, have a choice of retrenching and cutting back because of the financial pressures, or charging forward. And our board chose to charge forward in a big way. And luckily, we had built up a balance sheet that enabled us to do that. But we're certainly trying to backfill and go after as many resources as we can so that we can sustain this stepped up effort long term. Unfortunately, one of the things we had to park was really looking strategically at the world has changed. How do we change our strategic plan? We planned and essentially wrote 2 EDA grant applications that were really looking at deep market research to see what we do, and we just had to keep putting them on the shelf because of the demand of immediate businesses. But that's what we want to get into now, because we know that every industry sector we focus on has gone through tremendous change, and that creates threats and opportunities for our region to go after.
Great, thank you, Brett. And learning more here too, cocooning businesses, making sure they're ready for when the time is right. And I'm glad to hear you have some business start activity taking place in your region as well. It's a fascinating time to see them launching during a pandemic. So Colleen, you're next.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and share a bit today. I always feel like I'm a newbie still, and I'm always just amazed at all the things that all of you are doing that is so different from what we do here in Southern Oregon. I want to preface my comments by saying that right before this, really in December, we restructured our staff to focus more on business retention. And so in January, I had a new hire, a new business development manager, and then another new hire in February, a new business development manager to do just that thing. And then March, we were hit with COVID, and I had some new people on staff. So it added some additional challenges in this time. But, what did we do initially? We took some time off, paid time off, just to think creatively, not knowing what we were going to need to do. We really are a membership-driven organization that relies on both public and private sector memberships. So we didn't know how this was going to impact them. Most of what we do is in the traded sector. It's really not in retail or service sector. So we weren't even sure yet what our role would be. So we really excused ourselves also from non-essential meetings that were not action-oriented. And we just took care of ourselves because we were preparing for a lot of work ahead. And we certainly have been doing a lot of different work. I would say that we have just pivoted and pivoted again during this time. So like Brett's organization, we are an economic development district. We do have a revolving loan fund. And what we did also was we forgave interest for 3 months on our current portfolio. And that resulted in about a $40,000 revenue hit to the agency. We also gave them options to defer their payments for 3 months as well. And most of those who were current did take advantage of that option. And then as in the early days, we were considering, well, what kind of a hit will this be on our membership? Because we were also at the same time planning our budget. So we automatically assumed about a 20% drop in revenues, and we planned for that. So we downsized somewhat, and I held off in hiring or replacing yet another position that historically focuses on relocation inquiries. So while we were doing that, then we realized we're going to have some capacity issues. So I began to speak to EDA and USDA and suggesting, hey, why don't you just forgive that loan that we owe? And that would be a great time to do that. So I wasn't shy about asking. And then we also pursued a private foundation grant from the Oregon Community Foundation to help backfill some capacity in this time until we knew what was going to happen with EDA or USDA requests. We did receive a grant from the Oregon Community Foundation, a small business stabilization grant. It wasn't what we asked for, but we knew that those most impacted in our region were retail and service sector businesses. Those aren't normally the ones that we reach out to. And so, as you all know, the PPP that was offered was not available to chambers, who are mostly formed as 501c6s. So we took a little bit for ourselves, and we ended up granting dollars to our local chambers, not a big amount. I think what was really impactful about that decision was it demonstrated that we're in it together and we know you're on the front lines. How can we help you in this time? Last year, we just updated our CEDS, our Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, and we call it One Rogue Valley. And so we were hoping to, the why behind it, demonstrate that we are one Rogue Valley and we're in this together. So we're going to help you, our chambers, who are on the front lines. And then a portion of that grant, we also passed through to retail and service sector companies that were recommended by our chambers. As we went on into the current day, we pursued EDA offerings. We did receive a large supplemental planner grant through the CARES Act from EDA. And as you all know, those had to be related to COVID. But what we did also is we looked at that strategy that we just completed, which was completed 7 months ahead of time, I might say, and said, where can we be most impactful for COVID, but also impact and get some things done related to our strategy. So in our region, we are very dependent on tourism and several key venues. Many of you may know about the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. That company alone, which is based in Ashland, Oregon, employs 500 people, and nobody could go to a play. And so we set some dollars aside to help the one chamber in our region implement a diversification strategy for these venues and tourism-based businesses. We also set aside funds for our small communities. We range from largest city of 80,000 people down to the smallest of 500. So we set aside specific funds to help the smaller cities with placemaking projects that could help them also respond to COVID. And then we also worked with our tourism partner to figure out a stronger revenue stream for them. So part of those dollars coming from the EDA to us is going right back out to our partners, because again, we want to demonstrate that we are in this together. We've also pivoted to provide grant administrative services to many of our jurisdictions during this time who are receiving funds through the State Economic Development Agency and their CARES Act funding. I might add that we don't get any administrative fee for this, but it's the right thing to do. And we were prepared to do it, and we have rocked it. I will just say I have exceptional staff that has really stepped up to the plate and done this. And I think because all of these companies again and businesses that were serving our retail and service sector, it has allowed us to see things from the other side of the mountain, I say, just to see what they're going through and realizing that there's a lot of gaps still that need to be filled for our small businesses. And so that has given us some intelligence to work better with our small business development centers and chambers who are on the front line and figure out how do we fill that gap alongside them. And then I think one of you mentioned about, leaning in, leaning forward. Listening is a key thing right now for us. And so we're listening to understand what it is that we don't understand yet, and then be able to strategize around that. So right now, what are we doing? We were just a month ago, about 5 weeks ago, impacted by wildfires that took out 2,800 homes, devastated 2 very small communities. So now we're pivoting again to figure out what is our role in the near term, in the midterm, and the long term as we rebuild several communities. And we're not in the business of housing or anything like that. We're not a cog. And so we're trying to figure out where do we play without duplicating efforts. And so we're exploring that right now. I am pursuing a technical assistance grant from the EDA. And I want to give a shout out right now. If Superior California Economic Development is on the call, I want to give a shout out to them. Within days of our own disaster, they called us and said, don't reinvent the wheel. Let us help you. Let us tell you where we failed and the lessons we learned along this way. So we've been leaning on some of their expertise, and we're pursuing dollars to perhaps have a long-term recovery coordinator for our region in response to the fires. We're going to set up a private sector funded grant fund for small businesses. We had about 100 businesses that were leveled. They're no longer there. Most of them are retail, but some of them are traded sectors. So now we have a major cleanup effort, and so many things to think about in this time. So we're still leaning in and learning what we need to do at this time, but we know it's a long haul for us. The why are we doing what we're doing is because economic development matters. We all know it, and we're just learning to pivot. We're learning to be relevant and timely, demonstrate excellence, be transparent. And I'm very fond of always saying we're just going to do the right thing, and we're trying to figure out what the next right thing to do is at this time. So again, I want to thank all of you for your attention and the opportunity to share what the newbie over here is doing on the West Coast in Southern Oregon. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. That's a really interesting story, and I appreciate you sharing the things that you've observed and learned and starting to work with on the retail and service sector, because obviously that is significantly impacted across the country, and there's not any easy answers for that. And then how difficult it must be right now for you all having the double whammy of COVID and fire impact. Significant, but really heartened to hear you have a neighboring region reaching out to you. So as the moderator, I'm going to share a little bit about what we've been up to in our neck of the woods in COVID response. And we've been fortunate in this region that there's just been a long history of collaboration. And so in late February, early March, it didn't take long for a public health task force to get established. And that's co-chaired by our regional health district director and one of our police chiefs for the town of Blacksburg, where Virginia Tech's located, our largest population area. So those two co-chair this task force. And I'd say they meet 3 days a week right now. Before it was 7 days a week at 8 a.m. Now it's 3 days a week. And I'd say there's around 30 people that are on the phone call. Both of our hospital CEOs are on the call, and we have reports from the school systems, emergency managers, mental health services, and that call takes about 30 minutes 3 times a week, and they're just literally delivering the numbers and talking briefly about strategy. But off of that public health task force, there's several subgroups that are hard at work on a daily basis. We have a public information officers group, and that's a collaboration between higher ed, both Virginia Tech, and we have another state school here, Radford University, and the local government public information officers. They've crafted a public health commitment message called Be Committed, Be Well. We had ordered over 300,000 masks for everybody in our region to have access to a mask for free. And those are all being distributed through local governments, Parks and Rec, list goes on and on. Recently, we'd ordered several 100,000 pins as well for voting. And so all the people who are voting get a pin to mark their ballots with. But that's the PIO group has done a ton. And then our local government managers that we facilitate their conversations. They used to meet every other month for about an hour-and-a-half lunch discussion in our office. That quickly evolved to 3 times a week phone call with our health district director. So they were really doing a great job of working together and talking about whether they were going to close down recreation facilities so people wouldn't move over to one community to access their pool or parks or whatever it may be. So they did a lot of things in lockstep going into the pandemic, and then we're still have that frequency of conversation with our local government managers about implementation. One of the things that they asked us to help implement several months ago, and we're in the thick of it now, is what's called the New River Valley Business Continuity Team. And the concept is that if you are operating a business, it could be public, it could be private, nonprofit, if you have any questions about operating in a COVID environment, then you can call one of our 3 staff members who are hired for this initiative. We have a public health director who works daily with the regional health district office. We have a program manager that's tracking all of the impact and all the financials. And then we have a public school health or a public health schools liaison to work closely with the schools as they operate with COVID situations. So if a business just has questions about, hey, we think somebody was exposed, what do we do? All the way to, yeah, we have a positive, and this is what the contact tracing has proven out. How do we continue to operate? And the whole intent is to decrease the amount of downtime that a business may have, because gosh, back in March and April, CDC guidelines would have had 2 negative tests to get you back to work. Now we know that's much different situation about just isolation, quarantining, and we're able to keep our large manufacturers going and all the way down to mom and pop shops. But that's, so far we've been in operation for about 2 months with this business continuity team, and we've had several thousand jobs that I think have been able to keep going at a higher clip than they might not have been otherwise. Also, as a part of that program, if they do have a positive case, then we work with them to complete their business continuity plan, which is really just a 2-page worksheet. You know, if the lead person's out, then who's next in charge and how do they make decisions in this environment. They also have access to a pool of resources. We have a bucket of funds set aside for environmental site cleaning. We also have funds available for public relations. If they need to message to their employees or customers or supply chain that they had a positive and how they're going about addressing that. And we also have funds available for legal resources for HR consulting. So again, if they have a positive, they can, we work with them, and then we'll cost share those expenses 50% to help them stay in operations and not shut down ultimately. But yeah, it's been a fascinating time. Great ideas percolating, and thankfully our region has asked us to help, much like the other panelists. And it's great being in that position to help and provide services, but it's stretching us all pretty thin, I'd say. So with that, you all who are listening and have heard 4 different stories from across the country of what we're doing, and now we want to hear a little bit from you. There is a Mentimeter that we're going to ask you to fill out. If you've not done this before, this is a neat way for you to provide feedback for our conversation. And we're going to ask you to use that link that you see on the slide, and I believe it's also going to be in the questions box. And you can click on that link, copy and paste it into your browser, and from there you'll be able to type a sentence or 2 in response to the question, what ways is your organization supporting COVID-19 recovery in your region? And we'll allow that to populate for a while, and we'll start seeing some of those responses. And Brett also posted it for us in the chat, so you can find the link there. That might be easier for you. Okay, so it looks like we're starting to see some responses from the attendees, which is great. Seeing PPE, we heard Chris's story about that. I'm glad to hear others are doing the same. And small business support with webinars. SEDS amendment created by strategy team and board on priority actions. And strategic planning for recovery and direct assistance to businesses through new RLF dollars. Oh yeah, helping local and small businesses get funding to continue operations. Oh my gosh, it's, it was great that all this federal money came out, and then the local governments are helping to administer that. But then how do you actually get that dollar to the business that needs it? That's been interesting and a challenge. And PPE for early child care providers. Some are providing administration to the counties for the CARES Act funding. In Missouri, good. Seeing some training sessions out there. It's good seeing, trusted information on resources and providing loans at favorable terms. Yeah, there's so much information out there, and I feel like if our organizations over the years have that confidence that is needed in the communities as a solid resource, that's good that you're providing that message. A COVID impacts dashboard with the GIS staff helping decision makers in the region navigate pandemic. It's a good point. That's something else that we're doing with our business continuity team is we provide a Monday, Wednesday, Friday update from the health district director. We help with that process. We do a data dashboard for that. Referral services. Wow, lots of good content coming in. Yeah, it seems like some folks who had experiences in doing disaster recovery in previous situations probably had some experience in this level of work, and we did not have that advantage. It's been a crash course. Gosh, lots of funding distribution support. I imagine those dollars coming in, local governments didn't have additional staff to work with, so leaning on regional development organizations. A website dedicated to resources. Yeah, some CDBG recovery grants. I know we're doing some of that too. It's great. This is such a long list, and Brett just sent me a message that they're going to host this on the website after the conference too. So you'll be able to see and steal some ideas to take back to your region. Regional broadband facility or a feasibility study. Yeah, this has certainly highlighted the gaps when everybody shifted to working at home and schools from home on those areas without adequate coverage. Food access for seniors and at-risk communities. Public Wi-Fi hotspot assessment. Goodness, the list just goes on and on. Explaining what a Zoom is. Yes. It's a noun and a verb. Great. Well, thank you all so much for participating with the Menti. There's, gosh, lots more coming in. At this point, I want to circle back to our panel and receive some questions from our participants for our panelists. And you have that option to submit questions. And as we're waiting for those to come in to our group, I'm going to pose 2 questions for them to respond to. And, this has all been uncharted territory of sustained disaster recovery is what it feels like. So, and just a quick response for each of you, what would you say has gone well for you? And then what would you do differently in hindsight?
So I'll kick it off since I started off. So what has gone well? Our presence in our community as a helper. People really see us as a agency that can help, and they just kind of come to us, and either we can help, we can kind of direct them to the right place. So we're that connective tissue that I think for what we want to be is what has really gone well. What didn't go well was in PPE. It went a lot faster than we expected, and so we made a lot of mistakes. We broke the system at one point where we had to shut down orders because we got backed up on getting supplies out. So we had to figure out how to do online ordering. We had to streamline our processes. I mean, we were really from week to week learning new steps as things grew and exploded. But it went well, but it was good because my staff grew. We learned to pivot on a dime, because to be relevant, you got to pivot on a dime to be in the throes of what's going on. And so I think another thing that went well for us is we broke down silos. Sometimes workforce is workforce, aging is aging, finance is finance. In this process, I needed all hands on deck, all great ideas, and everybody just melded together. It didn't matter where you worked to figure out how to make the process better.
Great. Thank you, Chris. How about Brett?
Well, what worked well, I think the relationships that we had developed over the years really paid off. It allowed us to act very quickly and add a lot of value to our clients and help a lot of businesses that hadn't previously been engaged with us. The support from our public and private investors and from all of the stakeholders we work with has just been tremendous. What didn't work well is, economic upheaval brings up to the front some long-term structural issues, and we're all dealing with this, from racism and discrimination to housing challenges to high student debt. And one of the areas that we really need to work on is workforce. So we've been getting involved in everything from childcare, and it's really pathways. If we want to take somebody who's making 10, 12 bucks an hour and in our region, get them up to $18, $20 an hour with benefits and things like that, we have to go back and put more effort into pathways, and some of that is public policy that we're all dealing at a higher stress baseline, and then you add on top of that kids that they're in school one day, they're at home the next day, but already we do a poor job in our country of providing pathways. So the broken rungs on the ladder that we have, that if I take that better job, I go to community college, I participate in your apprenticeship programs, and I take that job, I'm going to get paid more, but actually I've fallen behind because I lose all of my daycare support and things like that. So it really has exposed that we need to do some more focus as an organization on those really hard structural issues.
Colleen?
Well, I'm going to borrow words from Chris, who I think said this, we leaned for what went well is we really leaned into it, and we demonstrated our value so that hopefully when all of our jurisdictions, we serve 15 jurisdictions, we don't know what the impacts, particularly from the fires, will be on property tax revenues. But when it comes around to them needing to renew their membership with us, we hope that we've proven that we're invaluable and it's not a question. So I really appreciated that line, Chris. I'm going to keep using that. I'm not sure yet what hasn't gone well, but for sure, like Brett spoke to, there are things that we have gaps in. I mean, we've identified things that we can do much better, much like the career pathways, and our schools still aren't in session here, and so what's not probably the top of the thing here is broadband. That has proven to be falls so short in our region because we're very geographically and topographically, that's not even a word, but the topography here is so up and down. We're 70% forested, and so it really creates some constraints for broadband. So I I think the things that we fall short on have really risen to the top during this pandemic.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, Brett, you had talked about this a little bit. One of our greatest challenges is the simple duration of this, is that when you go in with a task force model and you have these subgroups that are cranking out good work, and then it needs to evolve. So it is sustainable. And this is all volunteer efforts aside from the busy day job. So kind of navigate this for those next several months that we're going to continue to need to provide information to the public and support businesses. That kind of leads to one of the questions that came in from the attendees here. So Brett, you're talking about 18 months. What are you doing? And others can answer this as well, but what are you doing to prevent staff burnout and keep morale up high and everyone engaged and energized? What are you doing?
Well, it was hard. We had been in a growth mode before this. So like Colleen, I had added 2 team members last October and 2 in January. So onboarding new team members during this and then keeping them going. So a variety of things. Certainly financially, carving out, even though it's tough for our organization, investing in our team, giving time off. I just gave. We're having Thanksgiving week with our team. We're going to take the whole week off just to relax and try to balance this workload. I think the biggest thing I can do as CEO is give permission to stop working. You know, we hire passionate people. We're passionate about our mission ourselves. We've got passionate partners. You have to be able to say no to things, but also you have to give your team a break. We've certainly been investing in the long term. So if somebody needs a better chair at home or a printer or anything to make them productive. But that's my biggest concern right now. Not only burnout on the team, but burnout amongst our entrepreneurs and business managers and partners. So I think we're going to be spending a lot more time on burnout and mental health. Just make sure that we're doing what we can, and it's an area we haven't delved into in the past. So we're going to have to gain some competencies on that.
It's a great point about making sure the employees have the equipment they need to be able to perform their jobs remotely. We've talked about that a lot internally, but also the time away from the work. Because when you're working remotely at home, you kind of lose that feeling of stepping away from it. So a week off at Thanksgiving, that sounds like a great strategy. Something to look forward to. Colleen or Chris, anything else to offer up on the keeping morale high?
Well, I can jump in. Every year we take a staff retreat, which happened to be right in the middle of this. So we took the jet boats down the river. We just took the day and went down the river, and it was a beautiful day. So just getting out of the office, we were here still allowed to do that sort of thing and be together on a beautiful river. I bring in donuts. We have a lot of fun. We're kind of wonky sometimes. We all have cookie names now. I'm Snickerdoodle. So we try to keep it light, knowing that hopefully this won't be forever. That we have to have some humor, keep it light. And I agree with Brett, like in terms of what's it going to be that's going to make you more comfortable in your home. I have showed up. There's a couple employees I don't see at all, just only by Zoom meetings. So I have shown up with Diet Pepsi and coffee and whatever they need, treats. So it's the little things I think that matter, just that just keep us going. And we had one person on staff also that was displaced because of the fires, and so we gathered resources. We've helped that person, and we just keep loving on each other, I guess you could say that, and appreciating one another for the good work that they're doing.
Excellent. Chris?
So we've done a couple of things that Brett and Colleen have done. I think not to be repetitive, but we focus on our staff, and so we meet more. And you may say, well, why would you meet more? Because we're working from home. pretty much. And my finance comes in about twice a week, and admin comes in 2 to 3 days a week. But everybody else is working remotely. And so we're focused on the mental health aspect. And so we do a staff meeting on Tuesday, which is about a 30, 45-minute staff meeting, just for people to come back together. We play some games, we do some team building, we talk junk, just kind of, fellowship, if you will. And then on Fridays, we have a longer staff meeting every other week. We have a staff meeting, but in there, we create space for staff to talk, right? Like, hey, I'm struggling. Like, hey, things are bad. Like, I'm taking care of my mom. And it's an outlet for them to talk, amongst their peers, just to kind of get it off the chest, be a little bit therapeutic. We're not counselors, but just talking amongst your peers sometimes can be helpful. And then what we're doing here recently, staff has acquired some mental health resources because, like Brett alluded to, the burnout. People are starting to feel the weight, right? There's just a lot going on in the country and the world on top of being locked into their homes. So we're trying to be intentional to provide resources to our staff to learn how to meditate, how to take a break, how to catch yourself in a negative mental cycle before it spins out of control, because we don't know how long this is going to go, and I need the entire team to be intact. So we are just trying to make sure mentally everybody is there. And I fuss every staff meeting, don't sit at your computer for 12 hours a day, because I know they're doing it, right? They're putting in way more than they're supposed to. So I'm constantly fussing. Get up from your computer. Don't work 12 hours a day. Please go spend time with your family during the day. So just a couple of things we're trying to do to keep morale up.
Oh, great examples. Thank you all for sharing those. Colleen, you had mentioned you had asked for a USDA loan forgiveness, and the attendees want to know, were you successful in that?
No, not yet. I mean, they keep saying they're going to run it up the chain. And if any of our USDA friends are on the line, forgive me for being, pressing the issue. They're nearly paid off. But, I just think in terms of what would be really helpful right now is if you could relieve that burden on us so that we can retain that for some capacity. So I don't want to go through a big fuss to do it. Just there must be a way. So, but the answer is no answer yet.
Right. Okay. Well, you got to ask the question, otherwise it won't happen. That's good. Chris, when you guys were doing PPE purchasing and organizing all that, did you get pushback from local businesses for competing with them?
We thought we might, but we did not. Again, Walmart, the people that had PPE, they were selling everything they had. So they were not concerned by a gnat like us providing things on a smaller scale.
Right. This one came in for Chris, but I think it's applicable to everyone on the panel here. Is and some of you addressed it a little bit, maybe be more specific. But did you receive any additional funds to operate your organization, whether that's for the purposes of doing the PPE? Chris, you said you made $25,000 in profit, assuming you rolled that back in for administration. But yeah, did any of you all receive CARES Act funds from local governments or other sources for administering your organizations?
We did not receive any outside funding to take care of the PPE. It was a risk we decided to take because, we could have lost money, and we actually did lose a little bit in there because of staff salaries.
So in our region, there's been several rounds of funding that have come through the state of Oregon's Economic Development Department, which is called Business Oregon. The first 3 rounds did not provide administrative fees to us. This last round has provided some fees, just a very small amount. And we're actually working with an entirely different economic development district to get those out. So a little bit has come through that. And then I failed to mention earlier on that we also entered into some contracts with Business Oregon to kind of in a pilot program to manage some of their CDBG funds related to the CARES Act. This is brand new territory for us. And so we're getting a little bit of administrative fee through that as well, which is very helpful in this time.
Well, the financial projection that I did in March luckily hasn't come to pass yet. We're in a much stronger position than I thought. We booked loan loss allowance expense 450 some thousand above budget, just because of this pandemic hit our entire loan portfolio. And luckily we haven't, knock on wood, incurred losses, but we did book that allowance. We came in 75,000 under budget on our investment, our donations for the fiscal year that ended June 30th. But now that has stabilized. We're actually getting new investors, so we're doing that. Montana has done a fantastic job in getting CARES Act money out to our clients, to businesses, to nonprofits. So we've received now 168,000 in CARES Act money to support our organization. We were able to switch a team member full-time to bolster our Small Business Development Center through COVID SBA money. So it's been good. Of course, we're a 501c3, so we got a PPP loan and we've filed for forgiveness. So hopefully we'll get forgiveness on that. And then we received one of the EDA revolving loan fund grants that included the additional 10% for admin, which we're actually using to increase our lending staff because we've increased our loan capital so much that we're going to need more. But we were able to take half time of 2 employees for 2 years and also put them on that administrative grant. So I think the biggest struggle is just like our business clients are going through, which is setting ourselves up so we can continue to provide great service over, again, I'll say the next 18 months without destroying our financial health of our organizations. I'll echo Colleen. I given kudos to EDA. I'm quite disappointed with USDA Rural Development. They didn't even give us the waivers on flexibility with IRP loans that EDA did. So I'm hoping that they still step up. They might not be able financially to forgive IRP loans or let us postpone payments, but at least they could give us more flexibility in using what loan funds we have to meet the needs of our clients.
Yeah, I'd say in our case, I know the local governments had asked us early on if we had a need for some of their CARES Act money for administration. At the time, I didn't foresee it because we were receiving some of the EDA funds for disaster recovery. And then I think as we got a little bit further along in all this, realized, well, it might not need operating funds, but it sure would be helpful if we had some funds available to purchase some of the equipment, like you mentioned, Brett, to be able to enable continuity of operations with our own organization. So we have a technology schedule that we follow for replacing equipment, and we went ahead and replaced some desktops out of schedule with some laptops, so we'd have that flexibility. And all this also gave us rise to create a permanent teleworking policy, which our board's going to consider this month, so we can have some equity across the organization and figure out how we do this in a more permanent situation. So it's been nice to, before we were doing it on and just intermittent basis, but now we'll be able to have more of a permanent telework schedule as a result of this forcing it upon us. One other question before we wrap up our panel is that several of you all have mentioned new hires and before and during the pandemic. How many of those are permanent hires or temporary?
So for me, all of mine are permanent. They were pretty much all to my leadership team and some senior planners.
Okay.
So we, when we're a full staff, we're 7 people. And so the folks that were rehired in January and February, those are permanent business development managers. With some of this funding, we also received a new RLF and had the admin. We've been able to bring back a project manager, which is more of a temporary position, but I imagine that it could turn into a permanent position once we get through this, if she's interested in such a thing. And then I will also mention too that our loan manager is getting ready to retire. And so I'll see another transition soon, and that additional RLF money has allowed us to have some overlap, so I can perhaps have two loan managers at the same time for the training and the transition.
Well, if you want to live in beautiful Montana on the Missouri River and the Rocky Mountain front, we're looking for another loan officer and a lending operations specialist. And these are permanent jobs with a great team, great benefits, wonderful people. So contact me.
Is it permanent or is it temporary?
These are permanent. We looked at temporary, and certainly we've hired consultants to offer content in different areas, or partnered with groups on things like childcare that we didn't have expertise in. But we're trying to build capacity long term.
Yeah. The positions I mentioned with our business continuity team, they are temporary. We have some of it funded with CARES Act money through December, and then we have some CDBG funds that have a 2-year horizon on it, thankfully. So we're projecting, as Brett was mentioning, in 18 months, we know that we have funding to be able to continue the program for 2 years. And then if we're adding value, like Chris mentioned, then it'll be invaluable, and it'll be something that our local governments and the health department will want to continue that partnership with later. So to be determined based on the value we present. But yeah. So we have a rhetorical question that came in, but it is a serious one, was, are the executive directors following your own advice about your staff taking care of themselves? So I'll leave that with you in the back of your mind as we're wrapping up our panel today, because that is extremely important. If we're going to lead our organizations, they've got to be healthy to do so as well. So thanks so much for our panel, for sharing the good work you're doing across the country and that you've been doing the past 7 months, and I'm sure many more months to come. With that, we're going to conclude our opening plenary session. The next 2 breakouts are on rural housing strategies and business pivots to support economic resilience. So please refer to your conference email for the links to access those sessions. And thank you for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your conference. Take care.